At the age of 18, my mother married my father. Their union was celebrated with great pomp. My grandparents spared no effort to properly honor my father's wedding. A bull and several sheep were sacrificed on this occasion to honor the neighbors and the numerous family members who came to celebrate for 3 days. The first months of my mother's married life were like a fairy tale. My father was very attentive to her, and she reciprocated wholeheartedly. She was so happy that she felt no fatigue, despite spending her days doing numerous and strenuous chores from dawn until nightfall. She was content and wished for one thing only, that no storm cloud would disturb the serenity she was basking in. However, much to her dismay, a problem soon arose, threatening to shatter this idyll. The issue was my mother's delay in conceiving, a problem that, back then, and still today for some, many Moroccan families found unacceptable. A young wife's inability to bear children, especially sons, was seen as a grave flaw. Thus, a silent anger began brewing in my paternal grandparents toward my mother. They considered her useless as long as she remained unproductive. To drive her away, a series of altercations, disputes, and other forms of intimidation were secretly carried out. Tired of dealing with my grandparents, my mother chose to surrender rather than engage in a cold war with people she considered her own family. Heartbroken, she left her husband's home to take refuge with her parents while awaiting the official proclamation of divorce. The first days she spent there were a living nightmare. She could not behave naturally in the house where she had spent so many years. She felt like a stranger who had suddenly landed in a family that wasn't hers. But what hurt her the most was the way others looked at her. First, there was her mother's gaze, full of understanding and compassion, yet helpless to change anything. Then, there was her father's accusing look, as if holding her responsible for the misfortune that had befallen their family. Finally, there was her younger sister's gaze, filled with shattered dreams, as she had seen marriage as the most wonderful event that could happen to a young woman. The disappointment, desolation, and sadness my mother read in these eyes tormented her and robbed her of sleep. From time to time, morbid thoughts crept into her mind. If she had not been deeply faithful to Allah, she might have thrown herself off a cliff, putting an end to her suffering and that of her loved ones, whom she desperately wanted to please. But after 2 months of unrelenting misery, deliverance finally came. No one believed it at first. Terribly ill and visibly emaciated, my mother had attributed her headaches and occasional vomiting to death drawing near. Not wanting to trouble anyone, she had confided in no one. One freezing night, however, my grandmother accidentally overheard my mother's anguished moans. Rushing to her side, she found her trying to clean her blanket, which had been soiled by her vomiting. The two women locked eyes for several moments before my mother threw herself into her mother's arms. Their tears mingled with their sobs. A few moments later, my grandmother laid her daughter on her bed and prepared a soothing herbal tea for her. The following morning, after consulting her best friend, who confirmed the news, my grandmother announced to my grandfather that my mother was indeed pregnant. It was from this blessed pregnancy that I was born, and my father named me Farid.